Back in the day, survival foods filled the lunch pails of every working man. Meals that energized them from sunup to sundown. Whether it was the factory, the farm, the mines, or a dusty job site, our fathers and grandfathers needed energy to sustain them through 12-hour work shifts. Fathers told stories of these survival foods to their children, and every family had their recipes for making the most of what they had. Today, we're bringing back forgotten survival foods that every working man relied on. Meals that made the difference between going hungry and getting by. And the first working man's survival food we have today is ham hocks. One of the working men's meals that got the job done was ham hocks. Back then, nothing went to waste, especially not these tough cuts from a pig's leg. Ham hocks were rich in flavor. They made beans, peas, and greens taste rich and smoky. A slow simmer turned them tender, and the broth was pure comfort. After long days in factories or fields, working men came home to hot meals that filled their bellies and stretched the budget. It wasn't fancy food, but it was hearty, lasting, and made with care, just like everything else in those days. Braised Rabbit. During tough times, some working men turned to the fields and woods instead of the grocery store. Rabbit was easy to catch, easy to cook, and big enough to feed the whole family. Farm folks and factory workers with backyard gardens knew rabbit was a true survival food. Men would wake before dawn, bring home a rabbit, and still head off to their 12-hour shifts. Braised low and slow with whatever available vegetables, the meat turned tender and rich with flavor. Nothing went to waste at the end because Grandma made broth from the bones. It tasted like chicken, but without the cost of keeping poultry. Now, here's a working man's survival food that might raise eyebrows and wrinkle noses today. But back then, pickled pig's feet were worth their weight in gold, and folks were glad to have it. They didn't need refrigeration and could sit safely in a pantry for months. After butchering, families packed them in jars so nothing went to waste. Factory men often tossed them into lunch pails for a no-fuss meal on the go. The vinegar kept them safe, and the rich, jiggly meat gave lasting energy. Miners and steel workers liked how it stuck to the ribs and helped them stay energized through the day. There's nothing better than a cold meatloaf sandwich in a time of need, and working men knew it. These were no-nonsense, hearty, protein-rich meals designed to keep someone full through long hours of labor. They fit neatly into metal lunch buckets and stayed fresh till noon. Factory floors and job sites saw plenty of them. Wives stretched the meat with breadcrumbs or oats to make it go further. And truth be told, it often tasted better the next day. It was simple, filling, and reminded a man of home. Another survival food that worked as hard as he did, keeping the working man shielded against hunger and fatigue, was chicken livers. When money was tight, this cheap cut delivered more strength per penny than just about anything. Packed with iron and protein, it helped working men push through 12-hour shifts. Fried up with onions, it made a hot, filling meal that stuck to your ribs. Some even asked for it in their lunch pails. Back in the day, families raised chickens for more than just eggs. They used every part, especially this one. Stuffed bell peppers, garden peppers filled with a mixture of rice, a small amount of ground meat and tomatoes, became a working man's meal and reward after a long day. In Midwestern factory towns, these peppers were harvested from backyard gardens, planted behind row houses and duplexes. This clever survival food stretched a little meat to feed an entire family by bulking it up with affordable rice. Factory workers coming off shift could look forward to these colorful packages of nourishment waiting on the table. Men working long hours daily needed hearty, filling foods that delivered real satisfaction. The peppers themselves added vital nutrients, often missing from budget meals. Families passed down their special recipes through generations, each with their secret touch. Oxtail was once a poor man's Sunday blessing. It didn't look like much, but after hours of slow cooking, it turned into a rich, stick-to-your-ribs meal. Back then, butchers practically gave it away, but today, it's shockingly pricey. Railroad men, miners, and factory workers loved how oxtail stew could simmer all day and still be perfect when they got home. The meat fell off the bone, and the broth turned thick and hearty. During the Great Depression, it was a true survival food that stood in for the good meats they wanted, and no one complained. Grandpa used to say, "If you can turn oxtail into Sunday dinner, you'll never go hungry." Even in tough times, special meals still mattered, and breaded veal cutlets were a working man's version of fancy meals. It wasn't much, but enough to feel like a treat without breaking a really tight budget. In immigrant households across Pittsburgh and Milwaukee, families pounded thin slices of veal, coated them in breadcrumbs, and fried them till they became golden brown. A small portion of veal would expand to feed the family for a night, and men coming home from long shifts looked forward to it. It didn't need special skills, just a hot pan, a few common ingredients, a mother's careful touch, a little time, and a real survival food that tasted like more than it cost was served on a plate. And speaking of stretching a dollar and making the most of what was available, ground beef casserole was a solid dinner for working men and their families. When paychecks had to stretch, Mom made sure no one went hungry with this dish. A bit of ground beef mixed with noodles, whatever vegetables were around, and a layer of breadcrumbs on top became a meal that lasted for days. Men packed leftovers for early shifts, knowing it would keep them going through the day. In leaner times, there were more vegetables and pasta in it than meat, but nobody minded. It was hearty, practical, and waiting warm in the oven when Dad walked through the door. When money was tight and meat was hard to come by, families turned to whatever they had in the pantry. One of the simplest ways to get by was canned tuna mixed in a creamy white sauce and poured over egg noodles. Men on the line needed something hot and filling after a hard day's work. And this survival food puts a warm meal on every plate without costing much. During the war and years after, when meat was rationed, folks leaned on creamed tuna on egg noodles to keep going. It made a single can of tuna go a long way for pennies. Nothing hit the spot on cold nights after long shifts like boiled dinner. In New England and beyond, families made it with corned beef or ham simmered all day in one pot with cabbage, carrots, onions, and potatoes. It only needed time on the stove while folks were at work. And by supper time, the broth was rich, the portions hearty. The plainest vegetables tasted good, and the cleanup was easy. Men came home to feast on warm, full bowls that gave them back the strength they'd spent. Every family had their take of this survival food handed down to every generation, like a trusted old coat. Real steak was a luxury most working families couldn't afford, and sometimes a man just wants something that feels familiar but not expensive. And Salisbury steak was the next best thing. Ground beef shaped into thick patties, pan-fried and topped with onion gravy. It looked like steak and tasted close enough to satisfy. A few breadcrumbs helped stretch the meat, and the rich gravy made it feel like a full meal. Men packed leftovers between white bread for lunch the next day. It wasn't fancy, but it was filling, warm, and made a man feel like he wasn't missing out. Pork neck bones. One of the ways a working man shows his resourcefulness is by turning pork neck bones into a survival food that lasts. These cheap cuts, slow cooked with beans or greens, fed the whole family for next to nothing. Men who spent their days on farms or factories knew there was good meat hiding in those bones, and enough flavor to make plain vegetables taste good. The simmering could start early and cook all day, so supper was ready when he got home tired. Grandpa used to say that the man who makes neck bones taste like Sunday dinner knows what he's doing. And he wasn't wrong. Oatmeal meatloaf was a survival food that became a staple during the Great Depression and never left family cookbooks thereafter. When meat was scarce and hungry workers needed strength, oatmeal meatloaf saved the day. Across America, many working men relied on this cleverly stretched meal that used oats to double the size of precious ground meat. Factory workers coming home after 12-hour shifts found this hearty dish waiting for them. They ate, filled their bellies, and had enough to keep their families going. Over the years, families passed down their special recipes with pride, knowing that this survival food had seen them through hard times. Back in the day, beef heart was real survival food, cheap, filling, and full of protein. It might sound strange now, but for the working man, it was a source of strength. Railroad crews, mill operators, and factory workers all knew a well-cooked beef heart with onions and root veggies would keep them going all day. It was strong and made up in nutrients, what lacked for not being fancy. Beef heart were either sliced thin for sandwiches or served hot with gravy. It was a blue-collar favorite that had folks say that how it was cooked mattered more than how you cut it. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to Back Then USA, where we celebrate American nostalgia, one video at a time. Today's presentation reminded us of the survival foods that helped our fathers and grandfathers get through hard times. These meals tell a story about how we were raised, about men who worked with their hands, and families who made the most of every dollar. The working man's table offered nourishing foods that helped build this country during its toughest years. These recipes taught us how to live well with limited means. Many of us remember hearing about them from fathers and grandfathers after long days of honest work. Today, some of these survival foods have become surprisingly expensive, but their wisdom remains. With slow cooking, a little time and care, even humble ingredients can still bring comfort meals. If you enjoyed this journey through the survival foods of working men, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own family food memories in the comments below. Until next time, take care and keep the old ways alive.